Before the world wakes, a battle is already raging. You open your eyes, and instead of peace, pressure greets you. Fatigue in your body, fear in your thoughts, and doubt whispering that today will be too heavy to carry. But what if this moment is not your weakness, but your turning point? What if the way you begin your morning determines who controls your entire day? This powerful story reveals how affliction rises early, yet faith can rise faster. From quiet prayers at dawn to unshakable strength by nightfall, discover how starting the day with God transforms struggle into victory and weakness into undeniable testimony. The day broke not with calm or comfort, but with a heavy sense of pressure that seemed to settle over countless homes as the first light of morning crept across the horizon. While the sun rose faithfully in the east, many hearts rose slowly, weighed down by fatigue carried over from sleepless nights and unresolved worries. Reports from the quiet hours of dawn reveal a common experience. Before the world fully wakes, affliction is already at work, pressing against the mind, the body, and the spirit, attempting to define how the day will unfold. Early observations indicate that physical exhaustion is often the first sign of this unseen battle. Individuals describe waking with aching bodies, shallow breaths, and a persistent sense of heaviness, as though the strength meant for the day had already been drained before it could be used. Medical experts may point to stress and lack of rest, but those on the front lines of this morning's struggle report something deeper. An invisible resistance that makes even simple movements feel like acts of courage. Alongside physical weariness, fear emerges quietly but decisively in the early hours. Sources close to the situation note that anxious thoughts tend to arrive before breakfast, replaying yesterday's failures and projecting tomorrow's uncertainties. These thoughts do not announce themselves loudly. Instead, they whisper, suggesting that the day will be too demanding, that strength will not be enough, and that hope should be lowered to avoid disappointment. This psychological pressure becomes a key weapon in the early stages of the daily conflict. Pain, both emotional and physical, has also been identified as a central factor in the morning report. For some, it is the lingering ache of illness. For others, it is the unresolved grief, disappointment, or relational wounds that resurface as soon as the eyes open. Analysts of spiritual life suggest that morning pain often feels sharper because defenses are low, making the soul more vulnerable to discouragement before faith has had a chance to speak. Perhaps most difficult to measure, yet widely reported, is the presence of unseen spiritual resistance. Faith leaders describe this as a subtle opposition that resists prayer, delays clarity, and amplifies weakness. It is not always dramatic or obvious, but it is persistent, creating a sense that the morning itself is contested ground. In this environment, faith does not feel automatic. It must be chosen, often against the loud objections of doubt and exhaustion. The day opens, the scene is set for a decisive confrontation. Weakness seeks to dominate the narrative, attempting to speak louder than faith before the day truly begins. Yet within this pressure-filled dawn lies the critical moment that will shape everything that follows. The battlefield is established, the tension is clear, and the outcome will depend on which voice, affliction or faith, is allowed to define the morning. As the morning advances beyond its first light, reports indicate that the battle described at dawn does not immediately subside. Instead, it deepens. Following the initial wave of pressure outlined, many individuals are now facing the next phase of the struggle. Moving forward with bodies that feel depleted while something within them refuses to surrender. The day continues, but it does so under the weight of exhaustion that challenges both resolve and routine. Witness accounts suggest that physical weakness becomes more pronounced as responsibilities begin to call. Simple tasks, getting out of bed, preparing for work, caring for family, feel unusually demanding. Muscles ache without explanation, energy feels delayed, and motivation appears scarce. Experts may attribute this to stress or poor rest, but those experiencing it describe a sense that the body itself is resisting the demands of the day, as though strength has been rationed without consent. Despite this physical depletion, another development has emerged in the ongoing report. The spirit remains alert. Even as the body struggles to keep pace, there is an inner awareness, a quiet yet persistent sense that giving up is not an option. Observers note that this spiritual wakefulness often appears as a sudden thought, a remembered promise, or a deep inner conviction that the day must still be faced, regardless of how unprepared the body feels. This contrast between physical weakness and spiritual alertness creates a dramatic tension. On one side, the body sends urgent signals to slow down, retreat, or avoid the challenges ahead. On the other, the spirit urges movement, faith, and endurance. Analysts describe this moment as a critical turning point. where the outcome of the day begins to take shape based on which voice gains authority. Interviews with faith leaders reveal that this phase of the battle is often misunderstood. Many assume that spiritual strength should eliminate physical fatigue, but current observations suggest the opposite. Strength in this context does not remove exhaustion. It confronts it. The awakened spirit does not deny the body's condition but refuses to let weakness become the final decision-maker. Emotional strain also intensifies during this stage. The gap between what the heart desires and what the body can deliver creates frustration, guilt, and self-criticism. Individuals report questioning their own faith, wondering why determination feels stronger than ability. This internal conflict further amplifies the drama of the moment, making perseverance feel costly and uncertain. Still, amid these challenges, subtle signs of resilience are emerging. Small acts, choosing to stand up, taking a deep breath, whispering a brief prayer, are being reported as significant victories. Though easily overlooked, these actions signal that the spirit is actively engaging the battle, even while the body lags behind. Observers note that this quiet resistance often goes unnoticed by others, yet it carries substantial weight. There is no applause, no visible triumph, only a steady refusal to quit. In many cases, this is where the true struggle unfolds, not in public moments of strength, but in private decisions to continue despite discomfort. As the day progresses, it becomes clear that the tension between body and spirit will not resolve quickly. Closes with the understanding that exhaustion has not won, but neither has relief arrived. The conflict remains active, setting the stage for the next development, where thoughts and doubts will attempt to exploit this fragile balance. With the body tired and the spirit awake, the story moves forward into its next phase. The question now looming over the unfolding day is whether this inner alertness will be nurtured into faith or eroded by the subtle pressures still waiting to speak. As the morning advances and the tension between a tired body and an alert spirit remains unresolved, a new development enters the unfolding situation. Reports indicate that doubt begins to surface during this fragile window of time, slipping quietly into the mind before the day fully gains momentum. This phase marks a strategic shift in the battle, one that targets thoughts rather than strength. Sources describe doubt as arriving subtly, often disguised as reason or realism. It does not shout or demand attention. Instead, it suggests. Individuals report hearing inner questions that seem harmless at first. Can you really handle today? Or, what makes you think this morning will be any different? These thoughts often emerge while performing ordinary routines, making them difficult to detect and even harder to challenge. Analysts note that the timing of these whispers is significant. With the body already fatigued and emotions stretched thin, mental defenses are weakened. Doubt takes advantage of this vulnerability, attempting to frame exhaustion as evidence of inevitable failure. It presents weakness not as a temporary condition, but as a permanent identity, subtly redefining how the individual views the day ahead. Further reports reveal that doubt frequently draws from past experiences. Yesterday's disappointments, unanswered prayers, and previous struggles are brought back into focus. The mind is encouraged to replay familiar failures, reinforcing the idea that effort leads nowhere and hope is unnecessary. This tactic deepens the sense of inevitability, making resistance feel pointless before the first major decision of the day is even made. Faith leaders observing this stage emphasize that doubt rarely attacks belief directly. Instead, it questions outcomes. Individuals may still believe in God, in prayer, and in purpose, yet begin to doubt their own endurance, worthiness, or ability to persevere. This distinction makes doubt particularly dangerous, as it weakens resolve without openly challenging faith itself. Emotional responses intensify as these thoughts settle in. Reports include feelings of discouragement, heaviness, and quiet resignation. Some individuals describe a momentary temptation to lower expectations, to move through the day passively rather than courageously. This internal shift, though subtle, marks a critical threat to the spiritual alertness identified in the previous chapter. Despite the growing pressure, there are signs of awareness emerging among those affected. Some report recognizing that these thoughts do not align with their values or beliefs. This recognition, though small, creates a pause, a moment where doubt is exposed rather than accepted. Observers suggest that this pause represents a crucial opportunity in the ongoing conflict. Experts in spiritual formation note that this phase often determines the direction of the day. If doubt is left unchallenged, it quietly dictates decisions, attitudes, and expectations. However, if it is identified early, its influence weakens. The outcome hinges not on eliminating doubt, but on refusing to let it become the dominant voice. As breakfast hours approach, the mental battlefield remains active. The body is still tired, the spirit is still awake, but now the mind has become contested territory. The whispers continue, pressing for agreement, while faith waits for a response. With the situation unresolved but clearly defined, doubt has entered the narrative, seeking to shape the day before it truly begins. What happens next will depend on the choice that follows, whether the rising pressure will lead to panic, or whether the moment will trigger a decisive turn toward prayer. With fatigue still present and whispered fears lingering in the mind, individuals are now confronted with a defining choice. According to ongoing reports, this moment often determines whether the day will be ruled by panic or redirected by faith. The tension established earlier has not eased, but it has reached a point where inaction is no longer possible. Observers note that panic attempts to seize control first. Symptoms include racing thoughts, tightened chests, and an urgent need to predict outcomes before the day has even unfolded. In the wake of doubt, panic presents itself as preparation, urging people to brace for disappointment and minimize hope. Analysts describe this as a natural escalation. When uncertainty is left unanswered, anxiety rushes in to fill the silence. However, new reports reveal a counter-movement gaining ground in this critical window. Instead of allowing panic to dictate the narrative, many are choosing to pause. This pause, though brief, marks a significant interruption in the downward spiral. It is in this stillness that prayer begins to emerge, not as a ritual, but as a response to pressure. Sources describe prayer at this stage as raw and urgent rather than polished or rehearsed. Words are often simple, sometimes fragmented, but deeply sincere. Individuals report whispering prayers while seated on the edge of their beds, standing in kitchens, or sitting silently with closed eyes. These moments signal a deliberate shift from internal chaos to outward surrender. Faith leaders emphasize that this choice does not come easily. Prayer, in this context, requires resisting the urge to mentally rehearse worst-case scenarios. It involves releasing control at a time when control feels most necessary. This act of surrender directly challenges panic's authority, redefining the morning from a crisis to a conversation with God. As prayer takes place, early effects begin to surface. While circumstances remain unchanged, internal conditions show signs of stabilization. Reports include slower breathing, clearer thoughts, and a subtle sense of grounding. Analysts caution that this is not the absence of fear, but the presence of trust, an important distinction in the unfolding narrative. Emotionally, individuals describe a shift from isolation to connection. Panic isolates, convincing the mind that it must carry the weight alone. Prayer, by contrast, reintroduces relationship. It reminds those involved that the struggle is seen, acknowledged, and shared. This relational awareness becomes a powerful counter to the loneliness described in earlier chapters. Despite these developments, the battle is far from over. Doubt does not immediately retreat, nor does fatigue suddenly disappear. Reports indicate that both continue to linger at the edges, waiting for another opportunity to reassert influence. Prayer does not end the conflict, but it does change its direction. Experts observing this stage describe it as a turning point rather than a conclusion. The choice to pray repositions the heart, creating space for strength that does not originate from the body or emotions. This repositioning sets the conditions for what may follow, even if results are not immediately visible. The morning has been decisively redirected. Panic has not been given the final word. Through a conscious choice to pray, the narrative shifts from reaction to resilience. The stage is now set for the next development, where strength will be sought not from within, but from beyond. New developments indicate a shift in the nature of the morning struggle. What began as a quiet act of surrender is now evolving into a bold appeal for strength beyond human capacity. As panic loosens its grip, reports show that many individuals are no longer merely asking for survival through the day, but are actively calling for divine strength to meet the demands ahead. Observers note that prayer at this stage grows more focused and intentional. Instead of fragmented pleas, words become declarations. Individuals report speaking strength aloud, even when their bodies still feel weak. This change signals a deepening confidence that the morning is not faced alone. Analysts describe this as a critical escalation, from defensive prayer to assertive faith. Accounts from various settings reveal that this call for strength often happens amid ordinary actions. While preparing meals, commuting, or organizing daily responsibilities, individuals continue praying internally, reinforcing their resolve. This integration of prayer into movement suggests that faith is no longer confined to stillness, but is actively shaping how the day begins to unfold. Spiritual leaders observing this pattern emphasize that calling strength from the heavens is not about denying weakness. On the contrary, it acknowledges limitations while refusing to be defined by them. Reports indicate that individuals are naming their exhaustion, fear, and pain directly in prayer, then deliberately placing them under divine authority. This transparency deepens the emotional intensity of the moment. As these prayers rise, subtle but significant changes are being documented. While physical conditions may remain unchanged, inner endurance appears to increase. Individuals describe a sense of steadiness replacing urgency, as though an unseen support has been activated. Analysts suggest this marks the arrival of resilience, a form of strength that sustains rather than energizes. Emotionally, a noticeable shift is occurring. Where earlier chapters reported heaviness and doubt, current accounts highlight renewed determination. Hope begins to re-emerge, not as optimism about outcomes, but as confidence in presence. This distinction reinforces the narrative that strength is being sourced externally, rather than manufactured internally. Despite these encouraging developments, reports confirm that challenges have not disappeared. Responsibilities still loom, time pressures persist, and unanswered questions remain. However, the difference lies in perception. Individuals now describe facing these realities with a reinforced sense of purpose, as though equipped for resistance rather than retreat. Experts in spiritual development note that this stage often produces a quiet boldness. There is less urgency to explain or justify faith and more willingness to stand firmly within it. This posture reflects an internal alignment, where belief, prayer, and action begin to move in the same direction. As the morning advances, it becomes evident that the call for heavenly strength has altered the trajectory of the day. Weakness no longer dominates the narrative, even though it remains present. Instead, endurance and trust begin to shape decisions, reactions, and expectations. Strength has been called down, not as a dramatic rescue, but as a sustaining force. With this foundation established, the next phase will test whether this newly claimed strength can hold firm as the pressures of the day continue to rise. As the morning transitions into full daylight, reports confirm that the strength called upon is now being tested. Despite renewed resolve and spiritual endurance, external conditions show little sign of improvement. Challenges persist, schedules tighten, and pressures continue to mount. The storm described earlier has not passed, raising a critical question. Will the strength drawn from prayer be enough to stand firm when circumstances refuse to change? Observers note that this stage of the battle is marked by confrontation rather than anticipation. Tasks once delayed now demand attention. Conversations cannot be avoided, and responsibilities arrive without warning. Individuals report feeling the weight of expectations pressing down, threatening to erode the calm gained through prayer. Analysts describe this as the moment when faith must operate in real time, not in quiet reflection. Emotionally, the conflict intensifies. While inner steadiness remains, waves of frustration and doubt attempt to resurface. Reports indicate that the earlier whispers return, now more aggressive, questioning whether prayer truly made a difference. This renewed pressure highlights the persistence of the storm, revealing that faith does not silence opposition, but must withstand it. Yet amid this resistance, new patterns are emerging. Individuals are responding differently than before. Instead of reacting impulsively, they pause. Instead of surrendering to irritation, they choose restraint. These responses, though subtle, demonstrate that the strength drawn from the heavens is actively shaping behavior, not merely internal feelings. Faith leaders observing this phase emphasize that standing firm does not mean feeling unshaken. Rather, it means refusing to abandon trust while being shaken. Reports include accounts of individuals continuing in prayer throughout the day. Brief moments of acknowledgement, silent affirmations, and steady reliance that reinforce endurance amid chaos. Physically, fatigue remains present, but it no longer dictates decisions. Individuals report pushing through tasks with a sense of purpose rather than desperation. Analysts note that this distinction is crucial. Perseverance fueled by faith produces consistency, whereas perseverance driven by fear leads to burnout. Interpersonal challenges also surface during this stage. Conflicts, misunderstandings, and unmet expectations threaten to disrupt the internal balance achieved earlier. However, many report responding with patience and clarity rather than defensiveness. Observers suggest this reflects a deeper transformation, where inner strength begins to influence outward relationships. As the day advances, the storm shows no immediate signs of retreat. Deadlines remain, uncertainties linger, and problems persist. Yet the atmosphere within those standing firm begins to differ markedly from the chaos around them. There is a growing sense of rootedness, as though stability has been established beneath the turbulence. Experts describe this as the proving ground of faith. Strength claimed in prayer must now be demonstrated through endurance. Each moment of persistence becomes a confirmation that the morning's turning point was not temporary, but foundational. With the storm still active, but its power diminished. While circumstances remain unresolved, those standing firm are no longer defined by instability. The narrative now shifts toward an emerging realization. Even without visible change, victory may already be taking shape beneath the surface. As midday approaches, new developments suggest a quiet but profound shift in the unfolding story. Though external conditions remain demanding, reports indicate that an internal victory has already taken place. Individuals are now experiencing a decisive change, not in circumstances, but in perspective. The battle that began at dawn appears to have been won in the unseen places of the heart. Observers note that peace is emerging where tension once dominated. This peace is not the result of resolved problems or reduced responsibilities, but of an internal assurance that the day is under divine oversight. Individuals report a calm confidence settling in, one that allows them to move forward without the constant weight of anticipation or fear. Analysts describe this as a hallmark of spiritual victory. Emotionally, a significant transformation is being recorded. Earlier heaviness has given way to clarity, and discouragement has lost its intensity. While challenges still exist, they no longer feel overwhelming. Reports suggest that individuals are responding to obstacles with measured resolve rather than emotional urgency, signaling a shift from survival mode to purposeful engagement. Faith leaders emphasize that this stage reflects the outcome of earlier choices. The decision to pray, to call for strength, and to stand firm has produced a tangible result. Victory, in this context, is defined not by the absence of struggle, but by the presence of unwavering trust. This redefinition reshapes how the day is perceived and approached. Productivity and focus also show signs of improvement. Individuals report completing tasks with greater efficiency and less mental resistance. Analysts caution that this should not be mistaken for sudden energy, but rather for alignment. When inner conviction and outward action move together, effort becomes more effective. Interpersonal interactions reveal further evidence of this victory. Reports include instances of patience replacing irritation, empathy overriding defensiveness, and calm responses emerging in situations that would previously have provoked anxiety. Observers suggest that this relational stability reinforces the internal triumph achieved earlier in the day. Despite these positive developments, experts note that victory remains subtle and easily overlooked. There are no dramatic announcements or visible markers. Instead, it manifests through consistency, restraint, and quiet confidence. This understated nature underscores the depth of the transformation taking place. As the day continues, individuals express a growing awareness that the most critical battle has already been fought and won. The morning's affliction no longer dictates the trajectory of the day. Even if new challenges arise, they are approached from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. Analysts describe this moment as a strategic advantage. By securing internal victory early, individuals are better equipped to navigate the remainder of the day. This advantage is not temporary, but cumulative, shaping decisions and responses long after the morning hours have passed. Victory does not always wait for the end of the day. Sometimes, it is secured before the day fully begins. With this internal triumph established, the narrative now moves toward its final phase, where strength and peace will be carried forward as a living testimony. As the day moves beyond its early victories, reports now confirm the final development in the unfolding narrative. What began at dawn as a quiet struggle against affliction has transformed into a visible expression of strength and steadiness. Individuals are now rising into the remainder of the day not merely as survivors, but as living testimonies of endurance shaped by faith. Observers note that this transformation is evident in posture, pace, and presence. Individuals are carrying themselves with a calm assurance that contrasts sharply with the pressure that once defined their mornings. This shift is not dramatic or boastful, but unmistakable. Analysts suggest that such composure signals a deep internal alignment, where faith has moved from private conviction to lived expression. Reports indicate that challenges continue to arise, yet they are met with a different response. Rather than retreating or reacting impulsively, individuals engage difficulties with clarity and patience. This behavioral consistency reinforces the narrative that victory achieved earlier was not fleeting. Instead, it has matured into stability that influences every interaction and decision. Faith leaders observing this stage emphasize that testimony is rarely declared in words alone. It is demonstrated through conduct. The ability to remain grounded amid uncertainty, to respond gently under pressure, and to persist without bitterness becomes a quiet but powerful witness. In this way, the day itself becomes a platform where faith is made visible. Emotionally, a sense of purpose now replaces the earlier focus on survival. Individuals report feeling guided rather than driven, as though each step is anchored in intention rather than urgency. Analysts note that this shift reduces emotional exhaustion, allowing strength to be sustained throughout the day rather than depleted early. Interpersonal environments are also being influenced by this change. Colleagues, family members, and acquaintances reportedly respond to the calm presence with increased openness and trust. Observers suggest that this ripple effect highlights the broader impact of a morning anchored in prayer and perseverance. Despite the visible strength, humility remains a defining characteristic. Reports indicate that individuals do not attribute their stability to personal ability, but to the strength received earlier in the day. This acknowledgement preserves the integrity of the testimony, ensuring that confidence does not drift into pride. Experts in spiritual formation describe this phase as the culmination of the morning journey. The affliction that once threatened to dominate the day has been recontextualized. It no longer serves as an obstacle, but as evidence of resilience and grace at work. As the day advances, the narrative no longer centers on struggle, but on continuity. Strength is carried forward, peace is maintained, and faith remains active. The early battle at dawn has shaped the entire trajectory of the day, proving that beginnings matter. Closes with a powerful conclusion. Starting the day with faith does more than provide temporary relief. It transforms the individual into a living testimony. What was once weakness has become witness, and the day now stands as a declaration that affliction does not have the final word. As the day progresses beyond its early triumphs, new reports highlight a critical continuation of the story. The strength and testimony formed in the morning are now being carried into wider environments. Workplaces, public spaces, and personal interactions. What was once an internal victory is now facing external exposure, testing whether the faith forged at dawn can endure beyond controlled moments and enter unpredictable realities. Observers note that this phase introduces a new kind of pressure. Unlike the quiet affliction of the early hours, these challenges are visible and demanding. Unexpected responsibilities, difficult conversations, and sudden disruptions emerge without warning. Analysts suggest that this is where many victories are historically lost. Not through direct opposition, but through distraction and gradual compromise. Despite these pressures, individuals report a continued sense of alignment. Decisions are made with unusual clarity, and reactions appear measured rather than impulsive. The calm established earlier in the day has not faded. Instead, it functions as an internal compass. Experts describe this as the extension of morning faith into daily conduct, where belief actively informs behavior rather than remaining a private experience. Emotionally, this stage reveals a deeper layer of endurance. Fatigue may resurface, but it no longer carries authority. Instead of spiraling into discouragement, individuals acknowledge weakness while continuing forward with resolve. This response reinforces the earlier narrative. Strength drawn from prayer was never meant to eliminate effort, but to sustain it. Interpersonal dynamics become a key area of observation in this chapter. Reports indicate that calm responses and steady presence influence surrounding environments. Tension in conversations decreases, misunderstandings are handled with patience, and leadership, whether formal or informal, emerges naturally. Analysts suggest that this outward influence confirms the authenticity of the earlier testimony. Faith leaders emphasize that this phase represents stewardship of victory. The strength received in the morning is now being managed throughout the day. Rather than being spent recklessly through worry or frustration, it is preserved through trust and intentional focus. This careful use of strength prevents emotional depletion and spiritual drift. Challenges continue to test consistency. Moments arise where reverting to old habits would be easier than maintaining faith-driven discipline. Yet reports show a growing awareness during these moments. A pause before reaction, a silent prayer before response. These pauses serve as reinforcements, anchoring the individual back to the foundation laid at dawn. Observers also note an emerging sense of purpose. The day is no longer approached as something to endure, but as something entrusted. Tasks feel meaningful, not because they are easy, but because they are aligned with a greater perspective. This shift transforms routine moments into extensions of testimony. Experts analyzing this stage describe it as a critical bridge. The victory of the morning is no longer theoretical. It is operational. Faith has moved from prayer into practice, proving that what began in stillness can survive movement, noise, and demand. Closes with a clear progression in the unfolding story. The strength gained at dawn has not diminished with time, it has expanded. As the day continues, the narrative no longer asks whether faith can survive affliction, but how far this lived testimony will reach before the day finally comes to an end. As the day approaches its later hours, fresh reports confirm a defining outcome in the ongoing narrative. Has not been exhausted. Instead, it has matured. What began as resistance against affliction at dawn has now evolved into sustained endurance, revealing that the day is ending not in depletion, but in quiet triumph. Observers note that late-day fatigue does attempt a final resurgence. As energy wanes and responsibilities accumulate, familiar sensations of heaviness and mental weariness reappear. However, analysts emphasize a crucial difference. These sensations no longer carry the same influence. Individuals recognize the fatigue without submitting to it, demonstrating a level of awareness and discipline forged earlier in the day. Emotionally, reports highlight an unusual steadiness. Where evenings often bring reflection mixed with regret or frustration, many individuals now describe a sense of completion. Tasks may remain unfinished, and challenges unresolved, yet there is no sense of failure attached to them. Experts suggest this reflects a shift in measurement. Success is no longer defined by outcomes alone, but by faithfulness and perseverance. Interpersonal interactions during these later hours further reinforce this development. Conversations are calmer, reactions more thoughtful, and boundaries more respected. Observers indicate that the patience displayed earlier in the day has not eroded under pressure. Instead, it has deepened, confirming that the strength drawn from prayer was not temporary motivation, but sustaining grace. Faith leaders reviewing this stage emphasize that finishing strong is often more difficult than starting well. The temptation to disengage spiritually after a long day is significant. Yet reports show that individuals continue to acknowledge God, offering brief prayers of gratitude, reflection, and release. These moments signal that dependence has not faded with time. Mentally, clarity remains intact. While decisions made earlier have accumulated weight, there is no evidence of panic-driven thinking. Analysts describe this as a direct result of the morning victory being consistently reinforced throughout the day. The mind, once targeted by doubt, now operates from a position of trust and perspective. Physically, exhaustion is present but no longer threatening. Individuals describe resting without guilt and slowing down without fear. This healthy response marks a departure from earlier anxiety, demonstrating that strength has redefined rest, not as surrender, but as renewal. Observers also report a growing sense of gratitude as the day winds down. Rather than focusing on what went wrong, attention shifts to what was sustained. Peace under pressure, patience in conflict, and faith in uncertainty. This reflective posture solidifies the day's transformation, turning experience into testimony. Experts note that this stage completes the cycle begun at dawn. The affliction that once sought to dominate the morning has now been fully reframed. It served not as a defeat, but as the context through which strength, faith, and endurance were revealed across the entire day. With a powerful confirmation, the day ends stronger than it began. By starting the morning with prayer and carrying that faith through every stage, individuals finish not drained, but grounded. The narrative stands complete, declaring that when faith governs the morning, it ultimately defines the whole day. As night settles in and the noise of the day finally recedes, new reports indicate that the impact of the morning's choices becomes fully visible. Individuals now enter a quieter phase where reflection replaces reaction. This stage does not introduce new battles, but evaluates the ones already fought, revealing how the strength claimed at dawn has carried through every hour. Observers note that the transition into night often exposes what truly governed the day. In this case, rather than collapse or emotional unraveling, there is a noticeable calm. Individuals report laying down not with racing thoughts, but with a measured awareness of endurance. Analysts describe this as confirmation that the day was not powered by adrenaline or willpower, but by sustained faith. Emotionally, the night brings honesty without heaviness. Memories of challenges resurface, but they no longer accuse or overwhelm. Instead, they are viewed through a lens of growth. Experts suggest this shift reflects spiritual maturity, where difficulties are acknowledged without being allowed to redefine identity or worth. Faith leaders highlight that this chapter is critical because it closes the loop. The same affliction that attempted to weaken the morning is now powerless to disturb rest. Individuals report a renewed ability to release the day into God's care, trusting that what was unfinished can be handled tomorrow without fear. Physically, rest becomes restorative rather than restless. While fatigue is present, it is free from anxiety. Observers note that bodies finally slow down in alignment with minds and spirits. This harmony marks a stark contrast to the morning's initial tension, signaling that the day's internal conflicts have been resolved. Mentally, gratitude dominates reflection. Instead of cataloging failures, individuals recount moments of strength, restraint, and peace that once seemed unlikely. Analysts point out that this reflective gratitude reinforces faith, preparing the heart to rise again with confidence rather than dread. Interpersonal reflections also emerge during this phase. Conversations replayed in memory no longer trigger regret, but clarity. Even moments of difficulty are viewed as handled with wisdom. This reinforces the sense that the testimony carried throughout the day remained intact until the very end. Experts describe this night phase as the seal of the day. What began as a battle at sunrise now ends as assurance at nightfall. The consistency of faith from morning to evening validates the power of beginning the day in prayer and intention. As darkness deepens, there is no fear of tomorrow. Instead, anticipation replaces anxiety. The strength experienced today is expected again, not because circumstances will be easier, but because the source of endurance has been proven reliable. With a quiet but profound declaration, when the morning is surrendered to faith, the night rests in peace. The affliction that once tried to weaken the day has been fully overcome, and the cycle is ready to begin again, strong, grounded, and unafraid. Observers note that while fatigue may still be present, it no longer carries the same threat. The body remembers rest, and the spirit remembers strength. Analysts suggest that this combination creates a fortified starting point, where fear struggles to gain early influence. Unlike the first dawn, this morning begins with experience on its side. Emotionally, confidence replaces hesitation. Individuals report waking with a quieter mind, not because challenges have vanished, but because doubt has lost credibility. The whispers that once questioned endurance now face contradiction from lived testimony. Experts describe this as the compounding effect of faith. Each victory weakens the voice of affliction in future encounters. Faith leaders emphasize that this chapter marks growth rather than repetition. Prayer at this stage carries greater assurance. Requests are made with remembrance, gratitude, and expectation. Individuals no longer ask whether strength will come, but how it will be used. This shift elevates prayer from survival to strategy. Mentally, clarity appears earlier in the day. Decisions are made with less internal debate, and priorities align more quickly. Analysts note that proven trust reduces mental resistance, allowing focus to replace friction. The battlefield of the mind, once crowded with uncertainty, now shows signs of order and discipline. Interpersonal engagement also reflects this progression. Individuals approach others with patience already intact, rather than developed under pressure. Observers suggest that yesterday's testimony has become today's posture, shaping interactions before conflict has a chance to form. Despite these gains, reports confirm that affliction does not retreat permanently. New challenges loom, and fresh uncertainties remain inevitable. However, the narrative has changed. These challenges are no longer approached as threats, but as familiar terrain. The memory of endurance reframes expectation. Experts identify this stage as resilience established. Strength is no longer reactive. It is anticipatory. Faith does not wait for crisis to activate. It is present at the beginning, guarding the morning before weakness attempts to define it. As the day begins to unfold once more, the atmosphere is markedly different from the first chapter. The battle may return, but it no longer dictates the terms. The individual now stands equipped with history, perspective, and trust forged through experience.